Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's really wonderful to see you all here today. My name is Mirasol Enriquez, and I am the director of the Latino Media Arts and Studies program here at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm very happy to see you all here for this really special event. It's our first speaker series event of the year. And you are in for an absolute treat with this Plática, the conversation with Chicano filmmaker Efrain Gutierrez, who is a San Antonio legend. And so I say that we are happy to see you, though we can't actually see you, of course. Please feel free to say hi in the chat, which will be open throughout the session. We will also have the Q&A chat that will be open, and that's actually for questions for our guest and moderator. If you have any questions for them, please submit them there and not in the regular chat, because that's going to be a little bit harder for us to find. And before we begin, I would just like to tell you a couple of things about our program and say some very important thank yous. The Latino Media Arts and Studies program is housed here in the Moody College of Communication. And what our mission boils down to is supporting Latinx student media makers and professionals, scholarship in film, television, journalism, and advertising. And we do all of this with our programming that includes the speaker series and other student events. We offer an undergraduate minor in Latino Media Arts and Studies, where students get transcript recognition for completing the minor when they graduate. We have for our graduate students and faculty at UT doing work in Latinx and Latin American media studies. We have a research group that is open to folks from across campus. And if you've heard about our student awards, we celebrate our excellent students with graduate and undergraduate awards at the end of each year. They happen in the spring, so it might sound a little early to be mentioning it, but we want to make sure folks are planning ahead. So for all you students out there, when you're writing your papers, making your films, keep us in mind. There's a $500 cash prize for winners in each category, so just keep it in mind in the spring and look for it after spring break. Of course, we do have some very important thank yous to say. Today's event would not have been possible without all the amazing support that we have. So thank you to our co-sponsors in Latino Studies, the Department of Radio, Television, Film, the new Latinx Pop Lab in the College of Liberal Arts. If you haven't heard of them yet, you need to go look them up. And then, of course, the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center, who's given all of our audience members here access to the first Chicano feature film, Please Don't Bury Me Alive. I hope you had an opportunity to see it before the event, so you got to enjoy this truly historic film that you'll be hearing more about in just a second here. Also, just a note that although general access to the film ends today, if you're a student or faculty member, or you have an affiliation with UT and you have an EID, you can still watch the film through the streaming service that's provided through the UT library. So you can look it up in the library catalog and still find it there. Thank you to all the folks who helped us get the word out, to Virginia Anderson, the Associate Director of Donor, Alumni, and Parent Initiatives, the Moody Marketing and Communication folks, Social Media Manager Lizzie Chen, Director Kathleen Mabley, Senior Programs and Communications Coordinator in RTF, Alana Weichman. Thank you for helping us get the word out. Thank you to Jessica Ayala at the Hub. To our Zoom team, ELMAS graduate student affiliates, Camila Torres Castro and Melissa Santiana, Maria Estrada, the ELMAS administrative assistant who wrangles us and also does our beautiful graphics. Thank you to Keith Berner, Assistant Director of Production Services, who continues to hold our hand through the webinars, even though you think that we had figured it out by now. Thank you, Dr. Mary Beltran, the former director of ELMAS, who created this speaker series and continues to provide insight around our programming. Thank you to Dean Jay Bernhardt for supporting the ELMAS program. Thank you to Irma Gutierrez for helping with a lot of the logistical issues as we were coordinating with Efrain Gutierrez, our speaker. And of course, thank you to our guest, Efrain Gutierrez, our moderator, Miguel Alvarez, and Dr. Charles Ramirez-Berg, who will be introducing our guests in just a moment. So at last, our introductions here. It's my pleasure to introduce Assistant Professor of Practice in Radio, Television, Film, Miguel Alvarez, who will be moderating the conversation. Miguel Alvarez is an Austin-based filmmaker and has received awards from the Directors Guild of America, Panavision's Emerging Filmmaker Program, the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts, the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, and the Austin Film Society for his narrative and documentary film work. He was selected as a screenwriting fellow for the 2013 Latino Screenwriting Project sponsored by Cine Festival and Sundance for his feature screenplay, La Perdida. His recent documentary work focuses on issues affecting Latinx communities around the country. His short documentary focusing on Latinx voting power in Texas, The Giant Still Sleeps, premiered on PBS and the Washington Post prior to the 2016 election. He also launched an online series, Voto 2020, looking at Latinx voting rights activists prior to the 2020 election. Miguel holds a BS in mechanical engineering and an MFA in film production from UT, where he continues to teach today. And he also notable is that he's currently serving as the area head on the production side of the RTF department. So he's definitely got his hands full, and we're very happy that he'll be moderating the conversation today. It's also a real honor to introduce Dr. Charles Ramirez-Berg, professor in the Department of Radio, Television, Film. Dr. Ramirez-Berg is author of Latino Images in Film, Stereotypes, Subversion, and Resistance, Cinema of Solitude, a critical study of Mexican film, 1967 to 1983, and Posters from the Golden Age of Mexican Cinema. His latest book, The Classical Mexican Cinema, The Poetics of the Exceptional Golden Age Films, was grand prize winner of the 2016 University Co-op Robert W. Hamilton Book Awards and was named an outstanding academic title by the American Library Association. One of the founders of the Austin Film Society, Dr. Ramirez-Berg served as president of the board of directors from 2001 to 2003. He continues to be an active member. Since 2010, he has served as the University of Texas Marshal. He has served on the National Film Preservation Board of the Library of Congress since 2010 and was a National Endowment for the Humanities Fellow, 1997-1998. Dr. Ramirez-Berg is a member of the Academy of Distinguished Teachers and has won every major teaching award at the University of Texas. One more thing, he is one of the co-founders of the ELMAS program, along with Dr. Maggie Rivas Rodriguez in journalism and Dr. Mary Beltran, also in RTF. We are very lucky that he has been teaching about Latinos in film here at UT since 1980s, and he's an influential scholar in the field, and ELMAS, this event, this audience would not be here today without him. So thank you very much for being here today, Dr. Ramirez-Berg. Please welcome to the screen. I'll hand it over to you now.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. And gosh, thank you, Marisol, for that wonderful introduction. I'm gonna have to have you introduce me to everybody. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to kind of introduce you to our guest today, Efrain Gutierrez, and I've known him since 2014. So what follows is kind of an introduction and a kind of a personal introduction, but I want to kind of set the stage in terms of him as a filmmaker, the importance and significance of his filmmaking, what he's been doing lately, some of the honors that have come his way because of what he did. So what I'm going to do is I have a little PowerPoint here that, so what I've got here is some photographs that I was telling Efrain beforehand. I don't think he's seen, but there have been pictures that I've been taking of him as I cover kind of the filmmaking scene here in Austin, and I've been shooting photographs for quite a while, and he's an important part of what I've been doing. So I want to welcome Efrain and thank him for coming to visit and sharing his story with us. So his best known film is his first one, Please Don't Bury Me Alive. He's a San Antonio filmmaker. He's self-taught. He basically just decided in the mid-70s that he had a story to tell, and it wasn't getting told anyplace else, and it wasn't happening in film for sure. And so, self-taught without any connections, and, just decided he needed to make a feature. And this film is celebrated as the first, you see there, the first Chicano movie. It's the first Chicano feature film, ever. And he's gone on to do other films, numerous other films. I want to mention the one that he made next, Amor, Chicano es para Siempre, in 1977, and then followed again, Run by Run, Tecato Run, in 79. I mentioned these three because they're kind of a trilogy about Chicano life. And if you watch these films, you'll see a presentation, a very authentic and real presentation of Chicano life. And those of us who've grown up in Texas, especially in Chicano neighborhoods and barrios and et cetera, will recognize it. And it has the feel of authenticity, not the feel of a crew showed up and shot this movie there. It's really an insider's look at that world, and that's what makes them wonderful. He's done many, many other films, and he can tell you about them, but things like Lowrider Weekend and Barrio Tales. I want to tell you a little bit about the story of this film, and I hope he goes into more detail with Miguel, but he just decided in the mid-70s that there were things going on that the world needed to be aware of, and he needed to make this film. And so, without any connections or without even a movie camera, he began working on this film. He got help from the Lutheran Church. In order to get a camera. He got help from a graduate student and a professor at Trinity University Film Department. He just was determined to get this film made. And I think that's one of the aspects that I really admire about Efrain, that determination and that just fearlessness. He needed to make this film, and the word needed to get out, and he just followed that determination and got the film made. I want to talk a little bit about how it was. So you made the film, so now how are people going to watch it? And what he did was he rented one of the screens in a multiplex, a 4-screen multiplex, which was unheard of in the mid-70s. Nobody did that. Now anybody can do it. And he just started showing the movie. And other films at the multiplex at that time were films like Superman and All the President's Men. And Please Don't Bury Me Alive was outperforming them at the box office. And it did very, very well, made $80,000 in the first month. He then, put it in the trunk of his car, and with his co-writer, Sabino, just decided that, Sabino Garza, he just decided he was going to, show it around Texas. And so Del Rio and Laredo and El Paso. He was a one-man show. I met him in 2014, and I just want to talk a little bit about how important that year was for him. It was kind of a year of many accomplishments and honors. So one of them was he was invited to bring his film to Cine Las Americas in 2014. That's when I first met him and presented his film. Here he is, doing, talking with people who had seen the film at the screening. Here he is with his wife, with Irma, and his partner and co-producer, and his daughter. So that was one thing that happened. Another thing that he did was he founded a cultural center in San Antonio. And just talk about giving back to your community. He just felt there needed to be a Chicano cultural center on South Flores, and took an old, abandoned restaurant, Chinese restaurant, and as you can see here, just built it into an arts center for all sorts of arts. And if you look, he's got music, he's got paintings, photographs, film, you name it, he wanted to support it. Okay. Another thing that happened in 2014 was every year, the Library of Congress, through the National Film Preservation Board, adds 25 films to the National Registry of Films. And these are films that are deemed by the National Film Preservation Board to be so important culturally, aesthetically, or historically, that they need to be preserved by the Library of Congress and restored if need be. And every December, there are 25 of these films that are added to the National Film Registry. And in December 2014, Don't Bury Me Alive was one of the 25 that was entered into the registry. So it's a huge, huge honor so far. And you can imagine all the films made in the US that are on this list. But his is one of them, and 25 a year, and his is one of those, and for good reason. It's a classic. A couple of years later, another honor came his way, and that was he was asked by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences would he agree to do an oral history. And they have an oral history department where they're trying to, preserve the history of any number of American filmmakers, and he was invited to do that. And here he is with Irva, and that interview took place here in Austin. He drove up. I was honored to be asked to do the interview, and we shot it at Austin Film Society at Austin Studios there. And here they are going over some details, because we shot all day, and they would go back and check and make sure they had the details right and the dates and all of that, the names. And here they are. This is the director of and the manager of the oral history at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And here they are outside the door. We use the screening room just on the other side of that door. And here's a picture that she took as we were beginning our interview. And so, as you can see, there are many faces of Efrain Gutierrez, and multi-talented, and a real joy to know, and a real historical pioneer in terms of film and Chicano and Chicano identity. So without further ado, I just want to thank him again for coming, and I want to get the conversation going with another San Antonio-born filmmaker and my great colleague in RTF, Miguel Alvarez. So Miguel and Efrain, take it from here. Let me get out of the screen share.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that intro. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Efrain earlier this year for the first time, and being a San Antonio native, it really is what's probably the right word, awesome, to be able to talk to him and actually have this opportunity to chat with him today. I want to see, I think we might be stuck on Charles's, let's see. Does everyone see Efrain? Efrain, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
There you go. All right, great. Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say thanks for popping in again and doing, taking the time to, to speak to us and tell us a little bit about the film, about Please Don't Bury Me Alive. I want to, as I was mentioning before, Efrain came to one of my classes earlier this semester, and we chatted about the film, and it's such an amazing story. Not only how you got it made, but then after it was made, as Charles had alluded to. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk a little bit about, about that process, how you got it made, what did you have to do? Because these were the early 70s. And originally, I mean, let me just start off with this. You're from San Antonio, right? What was San Antonio like back then in the early 70s? What was the community like? What types of movies were in the theaters? What were you going to see as a kid, or even as a teenager?
Well, back then I grew up mostly with Westerns. Going to the movies was kind of a Saturday kind of thing, and started like going to the Texas Theater downtown. And the movies were basically that I like were Old Yeller, Shane, real nice movies. The westerns that I didn't like were like by Randall Scott and John Wayne and all this. I saw him, but I always noticed that all the Indians always got killed. And the Mexicanos, they weren't much different. My mom would, take me to the Alameda Nacional, the different theaters in San Antonio. See Pedro Infante, Luis Aguilar, Jorge Negrete. And again, mostly westerns with beautiful haciendas, owned by rich, aristocratic, white Mexicans. You always, and the novellas were just about as bad, And we were always, the bad guys were always the dark mestizos or the Indios. So, that's the impression that I got as a young guy growing up in San Antonio, let's say, and migrants when I was up north.
Well, so, in the early 70s, from what I understand, there were two things that were sort of formative in planting the seed, in actually deciding to make a movie. And one of them was the Chicano Arts Theater. And then another one was a friend of yours that was sentenced to jail. And they both occurred right around within the same, I think, 1 or 2 year time frame, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with each? And actually, I think I have some photos here. I'll bring them up as you're talking.
Because this one's a little bit longer than the other question, but well, I had started Chicano Teatro back in '71, and I had been up in California. Got turned on to the Teatro Campesino by Milo Delgado, who was Milo, for those of you who remember Sesame Street, the first Chicano Latino in Sesame Street. But anyway, in the summer of '72, by that time, we had already been to California. We had toured to California. We had opened up again San Antonio at the Memorial High School at the auditorium. And then we went to the Guadalupe Theater. We were the first ones to actually perform at the Guadalupe. When the Guadalupe was open, we opened up the Guadalupe. And after that, not only me, but the people that were involved, Consafos, the group and everybody saw it as, that belonged to the barrio, it belonged to us. So, here we have the Teatro Guadalupe, which is awesome, la organización. And then, but anyway, we had also we're coming in the summer of '72, we were coming back from touring in the Midwest. We had performed in Purdue University, Michigan State University, with Raimundo Patlan and La Casa Aztlán in Chicago, a Catholic church in East Chicago, Indiana for the Brown Berets, a migrant camp and Catholic church in Defiance, Ohio, the Three Rivers Festival in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We performed on Chicano TV in Lansing, Michigan, and ended up on a migrant camp in picking cherries near Traverse City, Michigan. So that's how we got back to San Antonio that summer on food vouchers, which was about July. But when I got back to San Antonio, with the teatro, we were exhausted, and the responsibility of touring with up to 10 high school, mostly teenagers, being responsible for their safety, travel, food, lodging, booking, rehearsals, promotion, I was exhausted. So I decided to film the teatro and show the film in colleges and universities instead of taking the whole teatro. I said, well, I'll just film and, take it to the colegios. But when I was back in San Antonio that summer, Marta Tijerina, who from San Antonio, Channel 41 at the time, told me that Emilio Carballido wanted to speak to me. Carballido was the newly appointed director of Canasupo in Mexico. We met, we discussed what he wanted from me. He explained that Canasupo was a Mexican government program that worked with campesinos that collected the grains that Canasupo was in charge of, to control the prices so that all Mexicanos could afford them. Anyway, Carballido wanted to organize Chicano-style teatros to entertain and communicate with the campesinos, and offered me a position with Canasupo to organize Chicano-style teatros for the campesinos in Mexico. So in July, sometime in July or in August, we were already, we went back to, Josie and I visited Mexico, so I was gonna go work to Canasupo. But when I arrived in Mexico City, Carballido asked me if I was a Mexicano, and I told him, well, I'm a Chicano, but I'm a Mexicano. And he said, no, but you're a Mexican citizen. I said, no, I was born in San Antonio. So he said, what? He said, well, there's a problem, because if you're not a Mexicano, you can have the position. But then he asked me, because is your father Mexicano? I said, yeah, my father was born in Mexico. He said, well, we could give you a dual citizenship, if you wanted. But by that time, my girlfriend Josie and I were, Mexico City, it was too big for us. So we decided that, we were going to go back, but we were broke. But Mr. Emilio Carballido was also Mexico's #1 playwright at the time, a tenured professor at Instituto Politécnico Nacional de Mexico and director of Teatro del Bosque. So to help us out financially, Mr. Carballido arranged for me to make, a couple of speaking presentations about Chicano Teatro and visit and talk about Chicano Teatro with the theater students and with the Teatro del Bosque. He also tried to educate me on how to write a play. So after a couple of weeks, I collected money and we drove to Acapulco. Along the way, I was trying to meet Lucio Cabañas, but that's another story. But back in San Antonio, I met Sabino Garza, a student at Our Lady of the Lake University. Sabino, like me, was not happy with the lack of Chicanos, in Hollywood, the way we were portrayed. So he agreed with me that it was easier to film our own play and do it. Well, we're trying to decide, figure out what the subject or what play it was going to be about. My friend Alex Ayala was sentenced by Judge John Wood to 10 years in prison. I attended the trial and was very disappointed with the disparity in the sentence for minorities, versus Anglos. Sabino and I decided to make a film about what happened to Alex and injustices Chicanos face because of the inequalities in the judicial and educational system. So that's how we decided to go transition from teatro to film, because that's about the time that the idea to do a film came about.
Well, then, so you have this idea, right? You have the idea to make a movie, but you guys didn't have any experience, no resources, and no funding, which typically you need one of them at least. So how did you guys get started? I mean, like how? Well, what? I mean, I'm always fascinated by this. There's like you got wrapped up in some Mexican production that came into San Antonio, and you use that as a way to kind of springboard your way to making the film, right?
Right. Well, we tried, to channel Mexican filmmakers who were making movies in San Antonio, because you have to understand that the Chicano movement was already, pretty heavy, especially it's coming to me. I saw it more in California, but it was already getting into Texas and, the Raza Unida. So everything, was, so Mexico was already making movies because of the popularity of the Chicano movement in the United States. So one of the movies that was being done here was De Sangre Chicana by Joselito Rodriguez, his stage name Pepe Romay. I was even offered the co-starring role to be his brother in the movie. But, we had a lot of differences. So they finally, just brought a guy from Mexico, and we decided that we would shadow them in exchange for the teatro, some of the members in the teatro to perform as, the gangs in the movie. So you'll see me being a gang member or something, we were extras in the movie, but it didn't really work out. It's a long story, but they didn't really help us out. And then the other movie was in town, Soy Chicano Mexicano, with Cornelio Reina and Ana Berta Lepe. They were at the time stars for it. They kind of also led us to believe that they were going to allow us to shadow them and help us out. But again, nothing came about it. So with no help from Mexican filmmakers, I started saving money and looking for someone to film it for us.
So can you quickly just tell us the story about the missing film reels?
Yeah, well, see, when they promised to we were going to shadow them. By that I'm talking about I was going to shadow the director to see, Sabino was going to be looking at the cameraman, how they shot. We were not filmmakers, it's obvious we weren't filmmakers, but we wanted to make this film. So we tried to work with them, and we had told them, the reason they were cooperating was because we were going to interrupt their filming. And we were like about 20, 30 people in the members, so we could interrupt any filming that they were doing outdoors. So in order for us not to do it, they agreed that they would let us shadow and we would become part of that. But anyway, when it didn't work out, after going through it, we were at the Crockett Hotel and we still hadn't been able to get near them, really. And So I think with David Pena, one the Teatro members, also cameraman later on in my films, as they said, there's the roles that they had exposed roles that they had shot, and so the Sangre Chicana. So I told them we'll make him disappear. So because they were in a meeting and everything, and they wouldn't let us go in or whatever. So anyway, so they made it disappear, and then they're all going crazy. I told Joselito, Pepito Román, I said, hey, I'll tell you, I see you're losing something, I think I might be able to help you, and he knew really what else we did. So I said, now you're going to let us, shadow you, or, and you're going to treat us more fairly, because they had been kind of, again, going with all the white, people, and now it's a long story, but with the Chicanos and, all the extras, the raza, and the white people, they were raza, they were extras like us. They were in like the air-conditioned bus and, going with the, what I guess you would call the after parties and stuff like that. And we were, kind of, so that's how we were able to, get their attention. And his father, Joselito Rodriguez, apologized for that later on.
Well, so you're shadowing this company, right? But you still need to, again, find a camera, figure out how to actually pull this off. And so how did that happen, right? And I think Trinity University was involved, and the American Lutheran Church, right? How did you convince them to help you out? And what did they, and how did they help you out?
Well, the only people in San Antonio that had access to a 60mm camera and movie editing facilities in San Antonio at the time was Trinity University. So with 2,000 cash in my pocket, I literally dropped in and had a meeting with Dr. Bill Hayes in his office. It was, it was interesting because he took the time to listen to me. He was the director of the film department, because Trinity had a film department at the time. It was UT and Trinity were the major film that had film students. So after I asked him, how much would it cost to film the movie, he goes, well, we talked $24,000. I said, well, for the students to film it and do. I said, well, how does it work? He said, well, look, you get paid $8,000 up front, and you guys will have the script and everything, and we'll film it for you. You direct it and everything. And then when we're halfway done and we're done with the movie, we'll take another $8,000. And then when they do the A/B rolling and everything, and then they give us the release print, was not the final $8,000, $24,000 in 3 payments. I had $8,000 at the time. So, I was very dejected, and I walked out. And I remember when I was walking out of his office, he called me back and said, Efrain, you really want to make this movie, don't you? I remember telling him, sir, I don't know how or what, but I'm going to make this movie. And so he called me back. And first he offered me a scholarship. He said, Efrain, I could get you a film student here for, get you a 4-year scholarship to go. But I said, that's a long time to me. Anything over a year was too long. So I said, that's a long time. I want to make a movie now. I don't want to, wait 4 years till I graduate and then make a movie. So he introduced me to Jack Landman, and he was a student instructor. I did his class. He was a film instructor, and got permission from Dr. Hayes to have access to 60mm camera and editing facilities at Trinity, as long as I had Trinity student with me. At that time, Jack told me about a 60mm camera that was available, 60mm Airflex BL, which was at the top of the line at the time, for a used one for $10,000. Again, I'm broke through all this process. The American Lutheran Church was meeting in San Antonio around that time and looking for community outreach, and representative visited our Teatro headquarters, where Sabino told him about, that I needed $10,000 to make a movie. He was interested, a guy named Lopez, he was very interested, and he said he would try to help. So he went back to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and anyway, they called me back and said that they wanted to see our work, to send him a 3-minute scene of what we could do in film. So we hired the Trinity students for $500. They filmed the first scene, which is the pool scene, was filmed by Trinity students and edited A/B roll, and we sent a copy to them. In 1975, I received a $10,000 grant and bought our camera. I remember we were like cavemen when we first came in because we didn't even want to touch it because we were so scared. But anyway, Sabino became the official cameraman. I became the director and main actor. Josie Faz, the main actress. David Peña and Sabino's brothers, Juan and Jose, were the rest of the film crew. And Jack Landman became our technical support with a lot of help from the other students at Trinity University. And at the time, I give him a lot of credit because Steve Smith did a lot of work there at Trinity, did all the sound for Trinity there. Jack Landman, of course. I even had William Butt, grandson, the H.E. Butt, help out. And even William Sessions, I'm trying, Pete Sessions, I think was his name. But anyway, William Sessions' son did some filming for me at that time too.
Well, I want to show a scene from the film here, and so this is clip number 1. So let's just show that really quickly, and then we'll come back because I want to talk about it.
Okay.
Adiós acompañamiento, que voy para el campo santo, y toditos mis parientes gimiendo en amargo llanto. Ya me separo de todo y del mundo en general, hasta vernos en la gloria en el juicio universal. Adiós acompañamiento, pues ya todo está cumplido. Pónganme en la sepultura, en la tierra del olvido. Adiós por última vez, que me ven sobre la tierra. Ya me echan en el sepulcro, que es mi casa verdadera.
So that's the opening of the film for those of you who haven't had a chance to see it. But so first of all, there's 2 things that I find really interesting about this scene. First, it's the scale, right? As an independent filmmaker, and especially a first-time filmmaker, it's always, don't write big scenes. It's hard to cast quite a bit of people. There's quite a few people in this scene, right? There's cars, there's a cemetery. And right off the back, we feel like what I think is really, really important is we feel like we're in the community, like we're in San Antonio, right? But more importantly, I think, is that because of the scale in the people that we see in the scene, we feel like the community itself is part of the process of making the film. And so can you talk a little bit about how you got the community involved and why it was important to them to see this movie made and why it was important for you to get them involved in the process?
Well, when we started, of course, at the beginning, a lot of people didn't, they kind of thought it was a joke that, Chicanos, like, especially with no money, were trying to make a movie. But, when we talked to our friends, relatives, and then going to the people in the community, like the hearse was provided by Ortiz, which is a local mortuary, and he even contributed $500 for it. So, people started coming around, like the pool player, he just thought it was he put up $1,500. So what I'm getting, wanted to believe at the time that it would be possible. They were encouraging, about what we were doing. They supported us about what we were trying to do. And there was a lot of in-kind contributions that helped us a lot. They were just, hard to recognize everybody, but like even in that, the music, I didn't know anything about music, so all this music was brought in, like Romel Fuentes, Andres Segura, who helped out. So, it just started kind of mushrooming a little bit out. And then the artists started hearing about it. By then I'm talking about local artists, and Ricardo Sanchez, from El Paso, came by and, started writing, and, for in the Chicano Times, we started, getting attention. So the community started kind of following us. And I think that that's what made us successful at the beginning, is because we didn't really get too much help from the local media, but we did get a lot of help from, the Chicano Times, the different newspapers that were available in Lubbock, in El Paso, in Laredo, and wherever we went, there was always a Chicano kind of publication that was going on. And La Voz, like here in Austin that we have, they're still there. There were more publications, and these were the ones that were addressing kind of the Chicano movement, the audience. And like I said to everybody, my movie was, a selected audience. I knew my movie was made for Chicanos. It was a target audience. It was, I didn't really make it for such a wide audience. Got a lot of recognition, but my whole target audience in the beginning was the people that were like me, that I thought were like me.
And I mean, I'm sure, because at that time in theaters, it's pretty much you either go to you go watch a movie with the Mexican theater, right, which is the Spanish language films, or you go to where they're showing the Hollywood films, right? But it didn't leave much for people to see really any types of movies about us, about Chicanos, about the south side or west side of San Antonio, or anything like that. So I imagine that they were pretty excited that that there was one of their own telling a story about their community.
Well, see, I think that is true, because even the way we did the movie in what we call Tex-Mex, bilingual or whatever, not bilingual really, but I'm Tex-Mex mixture. And that's a problem that I had with Mexico when they were making. I felt that they were insulting Chicanos by the movie when they were making movies, and I brought it to their attention, because like I told them, you all don't speak like me, and I don't mean to be insulting, but I'm saying, long story. But when Emmanuel Lopez came down to help us write a script, in '74, he, realized that right away, that our language is a little bit different, even though we speak Spanish, and our culture was a little bit different. And so when the movies were being made, our accents were not, it's more like funny than the way we actually spoke. So, there was a lot of things that bothered us, about the Mexicanos también. And then, they were no different than Hollywood. They were portraying the güero better than the moreno, kind of, even if they were both Mexicanos. And the güero is always the rich one, So those are the things that I guess I wanted to, or the people saw that they wanted to see.
And was that, you mentioned Sabino being, was the writer on the film, and you had met him through Chicano, the Chicano theater, and then Josie, like that. I guess those collaborators. I mean, was it primarily you three? Was there anyone else that you kind of felt was part of like that core group that helped shepherd this along?
Yeah, well, see, to me, Sabino Garza was, my partner. I don't think we ever had a disagreement in all the time we were together. And Jack Landman, to me, if it hadn't been for Jack Landman, technically we would have never gotten off the ground. So to me, they were the key people, that Sabino collaborated more in the writing. Jack Landman, as technically with equipment and stuff, that would everything that we need in filmmaking. My girlfriend Josie, who co-starred, she basically supported my ideas, So, but the one that would be more that we talked about in the script would have been Sabino Garza and myself. I met Sabino in 1972 at a protest gathering at Arleta de Lake University, where he was a student and I had planned to enroll. I met Jack Lemmon in 1974 at Trinity University, where he was a graduate student. In Mexico, these are the people that I give credit to. I met, Professor playwright Emilio Carballido. Emilio Carballido was Mexico's #1 playwright at the time in 72. He later became director of the Bellas Artes in Mexico. And Emmanuel Lopez in 74, when I went back, we even flew him to San Antonio to try to help us write a script kind of play, still kind of at the time. And then there was another filmmaker that helped quite a bit, Milos Trunka. Milos Trunka was a self-exiled Czechoslovakian filmmaker in Mexico City. He was even offered to work in the film department around that time. He had an offer from UT Austin to come down and work in the film department, but he decided to stay in Mexico City. Andres Segura, that's another, he helped me with the native history. Andres Segura was the Capitan, with Chinachle, kind of the one that's given more credit for bringing concheros, the danzantes, into exposing it more into the United States than anybody else. El Maestro Andres Segura. They gave me good advice and encouragement. So, I there's so many people, but these are the key people that I would say, that helped quite a bit in what I was doing to get to the point where we got.
Well, so I have another clip that I wanted to show. I'm actually I want to, because we're right here, I want to show clip number 3, because we're talking about Sabino. And so if we could play clip number 3.
No, hombre, no llores. Si viejas hay muchas, Y yo tengo 2 viejas. 2 viejas. Y no me importa ni por una, ni por la otra.
Ni por otra, compadre.
No, hombre, en los domingos cuando me baño, tengo 3 viejas.
Pero dime, ¿qué es este jale del teatro? What's it about?
No, hombre, pues es una bola de vatos y nos juntamos para pelear el sistema. We do things about the things that are happening in el barrio. Con ese jale, pues, we do it.
Ya, pero ¿qué es la onda?
No, pues el jale es, de tratar de alivianar a la raza, ¿ves? Para que se animen, para que se organicen, y que sigan sus derechos. And that's the only part of the things we do. But we also do things on cultura y en historia y cosas así, Porque este jale no lo haces en los libros, hombre. No, hombre, los pinches libros son full of shit ahí en los colegios. Pero one thing we forget, vato, es que los viejitos ahí en el barrio tienen knowledge, man. But that knowledge is based on the truth. Y eso es lo que nos interesa a nosotros, la verdad.
Pues ese jale, ¿sabes de qué es?
Oye, ¿por qué no haces el teatro? We sure could use your help, man.
Oh, no, Charlie.
Oh, está bueno.
That's I love that scene. Well, first of all, it feels like it's part of that first original idea that you had early on, which was you wanted to film, right? The Chicano Arts Theater, like originally before you even went on to anything else.
No, that's kind of what you're right, what we wanted to, because, the theater, when we started, we used to perform in a lot of places for free. We would just pass the hat around and we were able to survive and get some, money out of that way a lot of times. And sometimes even we'd rehearse in Breckenridge Park or something, and we would even pass the hat out there after we had stopped rehearsing. But we also got political and performed in San Antonio, Carrizo Springs, Cotula, Eagle Pass, Del Rio for Ramsey Muniz and La Raza Unida at that time. there's some other stories where we were kicked out of Carrizo Springs with teatro because we were doing skits, but La Plática. But that's basically pretty close to what we really looked like when we were performing out in the parques. And the one with the hat and the beard, well, that's Sabino.
That was that was his cameo. So there's one more clip I want to show, which I think, and this all kind of ties into what I think this film is really, which is a portrait of this community. I mean, it's telling the story of this young man who ultimately ends up getting in a lot of trouble and gets sentenced to prison. But I think that what's remarkable about the film is how many scenes that aren't particularly about the plot in it, are sprinkled in here that just give us a taste of what life was like, and what was important in the community. And so this clip, we could now go back and play clip number 2. I wanted to see that.
Papa, you look tired. Why don't you go home?
¿Qué estás aquí, mijo?
Vine a hablar con usted. Vámonos para la casa.
Pero no puedo nomás irme porque sí.
¿Y por qué no? Why not?
Porque me corren del trabajo.
You're worried about your job, and I'm worried about your health. The doctor told you not to work. Vámonos para la casa.
¿Pero qué no comprendes, hijo? Si yo ya estoy viejo. Si me corren de ese trabajo, tengo que cuidarlo. Ya no puedo encontrar otro.
El que no comprende es usted, papá. Usted está como todo lo demás de nuestra gente. Ustedes son los que trabajan hasta que se caen muertos. Y el único que hace dinero es el gringo. Can't you see that? Cuando usted se muera, ni se van a acordar de usted. They'll just replace you with another brown face to do their dirty work while they sit on their ass. No, papá. Their day is coming. And it's coming sooner than they think.
No, Riquito. No tan fuerte, te pueden oír.
Pues que me oigan. Let them hear me.
Mira, hijo. I'll see you at supper. Y cálmala ya, ¿eh? Yo ya estoy viejo. I know that I'm old and I'm not as arrogant as you are. But our salvation is young people like yourself. I'm very proud of you because you very strongly believe in nuestra raza. Y anda con cuidado, ya ves lo que pasa otra vez. Cuídate mucho.
Yeah. So I really think that's what I love about this film, is that there's so much in the film that's that just talks about what was important, right? At the time, that's again not part of the plot, which is important as well.
This one, it shows Alex is ignorant about what his father has gone through. He doesn't understand what his father has gone through. His father's lack of education and employment opportunities, have him where he's at. But Alex, again, wasn't really thinking about history or anything like that, just an angry man that didn't understand, the way that we wanted to portray it. But at the same time, in every construction crew I saw growing up, Mexicanos, Chicanos were doing all the labor work, being supervised by Anglos. Even now, workers of color do all the labor, and mostly Anglos supervise or drive the big construction rigs. This is where the money is. This is where you get big bucks when you drive those big rigs. And look at most of the people that ride those big rigs. There seems to be like a monopoly or something in there. Like, I don't know. I still go by, pass by construction sites and check out the disparity in our raza. So, that's something that throughout the movie, without saying it, we're showing, the inequalities in employment and, in education throughout the film.
So you shot the film, you make it, right? You edit it, but now it has to be seen. And this will be my last question before we go to Q&A. But how did you get it seen? Charles alluded to renting out a theater. But what was that like? How did you get people to, obviously there was a community in San Antonio that would watch it, but what was that like? And then how did it grow?
Well, a lot of it came real fast. After we finished the film, we screened it at Trinity, with the film students, and Ricardo Sanchez came by, the Chicano Times, and everybody was impressed, wow. And I remember Sabino saying, we filmed the first Chicano movie. And so now we had a movie. So, what do we do with it? With 60 millimeter, now we think we have a film to theater film instead of just colleges. So, I went and offered it to Centeno, who was, a local rich grocer here that owned the Mexican theater, a couple of Mexican theaters at the time, and asked him about screening the movie, and, that I would split 90-10. I would take 10%. I just wanted to screen the movie. Mr. Centeno asked where the stars were. He was expecting, Vicente Fernandez, Lucha Diaz. But when I told him, well, it's me, my girlfriend, my friend, so he, of course, turned us down and, refused to screen the film. So did Mr. Braja from the Alameda. So I was stuck with a movie that we wanted to screen, but also there was another that we could forward. Jack told me about forward in a theater, but to forward theaters, you need a print, a 35 millimeter print. The blow up for the 35 millimeter print was $25,000 plus $1,500 per print. So again, we started going crazy trying to raise the money. We screened it in 16 millimeter first at Sacred Heart Catholic Church here in San Antonio, and we raised a little bit over $6,000. So we were excited, but we didn't have the money. But again, like I said, people started really getting excited after we saw it there, and we started getting more funds from relatives and my cousins, anybody that I could get, beg, borrow, or steal, literally, I was trying to raise the money. So, and then I contacted John Santicos, who owned most of the theaters here in San Antonio, who agreed to rent me a theater after refusing to go 50-50. I decided to go at the Century South, a theater complex here in San Antonio, with a sliding scale, $4,000 for the first week, $3,000 for the second week, and $2,000 for the third week, plus another $500 for the new weekly newspaper advertisement. And I had to pay him $4,500 a week before the premiere at the theater. So we went to the advertisement with no credit and less advertising experience. We started a marketing plan. Chicano artist Jesus Maria Cantu painted our poster. We printed flyers. So, he's the one that did that painting. The Please Don't Bury My Life was Jose Maria Cantu. We did flyers. Sabino wrote a 30-second commercial, and Jack edited the commercial, and we put it out on TV. Mr. Daniel Davila opened up the credit for me, owner of KEDA radio station. He supported us and just said, you have an open $500 line of credit. With that, we were able to get other like Cuca, KCOR, Spanish radio stations, and then we got Kono in English, and then we got the Spanish KWX in television and KTSA. Anyway, we went into over 12,000 in advertising, all on credit. So, by the time we opened up, I was so scared that I thought, I really have to turn myself in because we didn't have any money. But, thank God the movie was a huge success. And, I think we made 45,000 just in that first week right there I mean, it was just incredible. I remember when the manager called me because I didn't want to go down there, and he told me, Efrain, you got to come see it. But I was afraid to go because I said, if I go, they're going to want money or something, but he told me, no, something's wrong with the print or something. So anyway, I rushed over there. I get to the theater. It was about 5:30 in the afternoon. And he told me, look, it was full. And there was a line around the theater when I was walking up to it. And when I saw mostly Latinos, they were all going to see Please Don't Bury Me Alive for the 6 o'clock show. He told me, the 4 o'clock show is what you're looking at inside right now, is sold out. We had 50 plus people at 12 o'clock, because it was every 2 hours. At 2 o'clock, we had over 100. At 4 o'clock, we sold out. That's for 6 o'clock. You have a hit on your hands. And sure enough, and that's Antico wanted to come back and go 50-50. I said, no, we'll go with the scale, which will win around 90,000 or something like that for the 3 weeks. And then he took it. We agreed with Antico, and we showed it at the Varsity Drive-In, which I was real proud, because that's the drive-in where I used to sneak through the back to go see the movies. And now here I'm seeing myself on the screen. So in Texas Theater downtown, where I went to the movies when I was a kid. Like, all this is just mind-blowing to me at the time. But we're just trying to know, we don't know what we're doing. And we're exhausted because, Sabina and I, we took the film. It was such a success that Mexican theaters and American theaters started calling from Del Rio, from Eagle Pass, from El Paso, Dallas, Houston. I mean, we went all in all the little towns in between, Lockhart, Pearsall, all the little towns. So we were exhausted just in town because we had no distribution plan. We were just going whoever called us. We had, I think, 7 prints by that time. So we started sending them out. And then Sabino took off to I took off to the Midwest. Sabino took off and he went to Utah, Colorado, Utah. And I went toward the Midwest, Michigan, around all the Detroit area, Chicago. And so when the response was just incredible. So, but at the same time, we were exhausted. So after 3 or 4 months on the road, I made a bad choice afterward. And I sold the rights to the film, and they just shelved it for 20 years.
Well, that's a longer story, but let's get to the Q&A, so we can hear some questions from the audience. So here's one from Maria Vidal. Where does the term Chicano come from, and what does it mean?
Well, to me, it depends on different people that you talk to. Chicanos are really considered, people that are in the United States of Mexican descent. We're Mexican Americans. But the Chicano, to me, became real popular in the 50s. And a lot of Mexican Americans didn't like it, even though they're Chicanos, or to me, they're Chicanos, but they don't like to be the term, because the term started getting, a bad reputation kind of name with it. But to me, I remember with Andres Segura, he told me, Chicanos, the word Chicano, to me, Chicanito, says, comes from when the Aztecs were newly arrived in Mexico, they referred to him as Chicanitos, by the natives that were already there. He says because they were had come back to their land, or let's say what they considered where they were supposed to, where the prophecy to go. So they were kind of arriving. And to me, that made sense in the sense that, my father came back, he's from Mexico, came to the United States. A lot of my relatives, or most of the people that I know, Mexicanos, Chicanos, all our roots are in Mexico. But at the same time, we're not Mexicanos. We're very proud of our ancestry of being Chicano, being Mexicano. But, like even when we were kids, I visit my relatives in Mexico, and they would make fun of us because, tying us with the gringo don't like you, and, you're not an Americano, you're not a Mexicano, like, what are you? You're a pocho, that's where the word pocho, I used to hear. So I didn't like it. But Chicano is, we're our homeland supposedly, is all here in Utah, all the west area is where, the Aztecas came from. So in a way, we're coming kind of back, like the prophecy says, we're coming back to reclaim a land where we started from. So, to me, that's a simple, you might get different people tell you different stories, and I don't disagree with anybody.
Here's one from Emily Guerra. If your first film were to premiere today, what types of conversations do you think would be brought up? Do you feel that the same conversations that were had in the 70s would still be conversations people would have in 2021?
I think so. I think a lot of them definitely would be. Of course, some of the things that are coming out, and I was criticized at the beginning because it's they accuse it of being a very male chauvinistic film, which, it is, we don't deny it because, we intended to show the way it was like the first time I showed it, as a matter of fact, at the University of Texas back in 1976, the females in the audience were upset that, we were very macho oriented, and because they didn't like the scene, the way I treated my girlfriend in the movie and stuff like that. So I said, well, this kind of, it's true. I said, but, tell me, in your family, your parents, your father, I mean, are they, any different than the way, and 97% of the girls that were there said, no, you're right. My father just, basically the same way that, you kind of are in the film. So, I mean, that would be probably a conversation that would be probably brought up more. But I think that overall in the film, the issues that we brought up in the judicial system, because, even with, I hate to talk about too much because I hate that man, but Maxie John Wood, who was the judge here, and that's the judge that was killed by supposedly Woody Harrelson's father. He was a judge here that just, sent thousands of Chicanos, to prison. And I think that issue is still very, especially with the blacks. Now we're seeing it, the black movement. Well, we had our, but it wasn't a movement, but we've had, the same problems that have been going on were existent here. As a matter of fact, there's a young lady from University of Michigan that's doing work on some of the film relating to prison and the judicial system against Mexicanos. And this is something that I think, it's going to continue. This is something that I always credit Gus Garcia at University of Texas. Gus Garcia as being, the person that not only, segregation here, stopped segregation, or anyway, slowed it down in the 40s, and then in the 50s, he gives us protection of the 14th Amendment to be able to correct some of the things. And so that generation that you see, like my father, is kind of like the first generation that had no opportunities, that had to work migrants, that, people don't forget that, in the South, Texas, half of the population were migrated up north or to California, half the year in order to make a living, because there was no way you could get employment at that particular time. So, we've come a long ways, and I think that there's still a lot of issues that still are going on. And, like I said, the Black Lives Movement especially brings it to the head right now.
So we only have time for one more question. It's kind of a two-parter. How do you think Chicano film has changed over the years? And what advice would you give to activists, filmmakers who were wanting to make films now?
Well, I think, the Chicano films, the way, we didn't have any, but when it started evolving, a lot of times, and I had some people even accuse me that because mine was dealt with, going to prison and drugs, that I had started, that the Chicano went, more to drugs, and most of the films, the early films, like Camellia and all these independent films that started coming out at that particular time were related to drug or issues that it's hard to explain, in that particular part. Now, the second part, I'm sorry, you asked on that question.
Oh, the second part was, what advice would you give to activist filmmakers today who want to make films about their community?
Oh, wow. To me, I think that is, I have a saying now that I like to say is that we have to film our own films, that we can't let, other people define us. We have to define ourselves, that's what I do. Because if we don't, we're going to let other people document this. And I don't think we should let that happen. We're going to let others define us. because, like people, filmmaking is not just artistic entertainment. Films are like weapons that impact and initiate change. And I think Chicano, Mexican American, especially filmmakers, need to understand that. So I think that there's so many stories that are out there that need to be told. There's so many beautiful, like I get kind of people that what I did was kind of negative. But see, when I grew up, I wasn't educated enough to understand the issues that were going on. And when I grew up, I didn't have the role models. I didn't have professors. I didn't have the lawyers or doctors or, professional people that were in my community, and whenever we went out, everybody was white. The doctor was white, the store owner was white, the landlord was white. I mean, everybody was, the farm owners where we worked was white, the police were white, the judges were white, still are, it just kept going on. That this is something that, but through all this, we have a lot of beautiful things that have come, that have done, people that have contributed a lot. And so I think we got to document our own stories, our own history. And, like I give us an example, there's one person, that I've done research on, but that a movie should be done about, and that's Gus Garcia. I mean, this man is, to me, is the man of the 20th century, the Tejano for the 20th century. I don't think there's anybody, in my mind, that has done so much for the Chicano Mexican American. And, I give him, that's where the roots of the Chicano movement, lie with Gus Garcia and what they did in the 40s and 50s. So, that's what I would like to pass on to filmmakers, that don't be afraid to tell our stories. And I think that people will be interested in seeing them.
I think that is a perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Efrain. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and chat with you. Next time we'll have to do it with twice as much more time, so we can keep going.
I can talk a lot.
Thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining.
Can I say something before I leave?
Oh, sure.
I wanted to thank Marisol, and I want to thank Charles Ramirez Burke and you, of course. I didn't get a proper thank you to Charles, but Charles, I really thank you. And what I would like to say is that, in 1984, about 10 years after Please Don't Bury Me Alive came out, there was a gentleman that just passed away that wrote about, everybody had forgotten 10 years after I'd done it. His name is Greg Barrios. He wrote in Chicano Cinema, Research, Reviews, and Resources about my films that had been forgotten. About that time, there was, everybody thought all the other movies were the first movie that had been made. But he wrote that, a page and a half, but that got the interest of Cho Noriega at UCLA, who researched me and tracked me down in 1998, almost 20 years after my last film. In 1979, he nominated, 1999, 79, he nominated the films to the Library of Congress and the National Film Registry, where Dr. Charles Ramirez Burke, who was on the committee that accepted the nomination, was able to get the film into the Library of Congress and the National Film Registry in 2014. So again, I thank you, Charles, because I didn't find this out until, we were doing some, like I said, 1914, I had heard about him, but I didn't know him. And I had even mistaken him for somebody else, and I had apologized to that for you before, Charles. So that's what I just wanted to make sure that I thank all of you, but especially Charles today.
I think the lesson is that we all owe Charles a lot.
People don't know how important that man is. Pick up my hat to you, Charles.
The same to you. The same to you. I feel the same.
Now we got some young lady coming up. Be careful,
Yeah,
Charles.
yeah. Well, we're all helping each other, right?
No, really.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, thank everybody for tuning in. And again, thanks to Efrain for joining us. And please keep an eye out for for our next conversation with Elmas.
Yes,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody. So much Sananto love in the house and as well. And, you know, it happened right here in Texas, happens here in Texas. And thank you, Professor Alvarez, for moderating, Dr. Ramirez-Berg, for all the wonderful historical perspective. And thank you to this wonderful audience. You know how very special this has been. We tried to get to some questions. Hopefully, some of them were answered in the interview. And I'm also going to put in the chat for you the Academy, there you go. That's the interview that Dr. Ramirez-Berg and Efrain did a few years ago. And it's a lot more of your questions will be answered there as well. Lots of great stuff. So I encourage you to go there. And I'm just sorry that it's time to say goodbye, but please stay in touch. We have lots of amazing speakers that come to talk with you here at UT, and follow us on the social of your choice, and make sure you are on our newsletter and all that good stuff. So we hope to see you all again real soon. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all soon too.